Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to an extra special edition of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I'm here with my co-hosts Darren Woodhead and Tony Robinson today, where we have an Accrington Stanley Legends interview, another return to this series where we tell the history of Accrington Stanley and talk to someone who's played with the club in the past. Today, we're very excited to have a guy who played with Accrington from 2006 through 2011. Also played at other clubs around England, including places like Barrow, Stockbridge Park, Worksop, Padiham, and my favorite, Barnoldswick, among others.
Pretty good, Phil.
I've been waiting for these. I've been waiting for Phil's attempts at
I tell you what, you did well with that one.
Welcome to the show, Chris Turner. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Phil, do Padiham again. Do that one again.
Padiham?
That's good.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
yep.
Good.
Perfect.
Well, welcome to the show, Chris, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to chatting with you about your football career and then also your life after football that has kind of brought you full circle.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Like I said, over the last couple of months, I've been listening in, and yeah, it's a good opportunity for me to share with you guys my experience of, like you said, football league, but then what happens after you hang your boots up.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to Darren, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Chris. And I'm really intrigued about parts of people's lives that are off the pitch and how it impacts, such as a football player, during your career. So I'm looking forward to your stories, and thanks for joining us today.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.
Yes. So, I mean, thanks for coming, Chris. I know it's taken a while, and, thanks for your patience on that one. I mean, it's a story that, it'll resonate with a lot of footballers and what they've got to deal with, young guys who break into the game, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And as we've realised, we've interviewed, numerous players, those margins are really fine, aren't they?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I suppose growing up as a young boy or a young girl, it's a lot of people's dreams to become a footballer, and you sort of set off on your journey. From a very young age, I was only 6 when I started playing football, and my dad's taken me absolutely everywhere to play football. We've travelled all over the country, but I started off playing for Barrow Celtic, which is a local team to where I was. And realised I was fairly good. I played in sort of the year groups above me. When I was only 6, I was playing in the under 8s and under 9s. And then it sort of like took off from there. But you sort of look back and you think that it's so hard, I think physically and mentally, to sustain a career in football. And I think that's why it's interesting listening to these podcasts, because you see different people's and you hear people's experiences of how they dropped out of the game. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, once you do drop out of the game, it's very hard to recover.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the part that fascinates me, is that when you excel at a young age and you get onto a club and you got on with Burnley at a young age, but then you were let go at 16, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So again, I played for Barrow Celtic, and then there were a couple of scouts sniffing around when I was only 7 or 8 years old, and one of them being Burnley, with it being my hometown club. It was a no-brainer for me, really, to sort of sign those papers and get started down at Burnley Centre of Excellence. And then that's when the pressure kicks in. For me, I think you go from playing with your friends, and then as soon as you join a centre of excellence or an academy, the pressure from such a young age, it starts and it builds and it builds. And as you get to those sort of like teenage years, when you're adolescents and you get into 13, 14, and you're trying to deal with that pressure alongside your schoolwork, it can become really tough. And I was released at 16, so I was in year 11 at school. Burnley, it's all I've known really, and it's sort of like, what do you do? I'd geared up to being a footballer. I got released for being too small. At the time, I look back and I don't really think Burnley gives me enough time to develop physically. I was only small, and I suppose when you get into those youth team ages where you're 16, 17 and then hoping to get reserve team football and first team football, you need to develop much quicker in the eyes of these academies and football clubs, and unfortunately I wasn't right at that time for Burnley.
And when you were 16, who was the manager that released you at the time?
It was Vince Overson. So Vince Overson, very successful in the game. He played for Burnley for a number of years. He played for Stoke City as well, I think. And it was Vince, and I've known Vince for a very long time. And it was a very difficult conversation, and I didn't really know it was coming. I just remember my dad at the end of one of the training sessions just saying, Vince wants a word with us. And I thought, am I going to be getting a contract for the youth team? I'd seen a couple of my friends get released, but I was playing consistently week in, week out, so I didn't really sense it coming. And yeah, he took me in and he just said, we don't think physically you're ready for youth team football. We think sort of ability-wise and technical ability, I was one of the best, and I was quick, but they wanted young adults, strong lads in that youth team, and I didn't sort of make the grade. So it was a very long journey home with my dad. Didn't really know what to say to each other. But I'm just very lucky. I've got a really strong sort of friends and family network, and we all sort of pulled each other through, really.
Was that the biggest setback? The biggest setback you had at that point in your life?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. Like I say, it was more pride, I think, and feeling like I'd let people down. I remember going to school the next day. There was a couple of boys who were still on the books at Burnley who hadn't been released, one of them being Adam Kay, who was down at Burnley. He got a professional contract, and he was in my classes, and it was very, very uncomfortable because I was I was young. I was 15, 16, and you didn't want to show that you was upset. I went to an all-boys school, which probably doesn't help because you've got to be of that mentality where you've got to come across tough and not show any emotion. But yeah, it was a rough couple of weeks, really, just to try and sort of get back into the groove of putting a smile on my face. And it is, I think, at that age, up and down the country, there's boys that are being let go, and it's one of those where you've just got to sort of show what you're made of and just get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in the items that we were going to speak about tonight, but because you've gone on about it and mentioned it, just around these academies, and it's even more prevalent now, isn't it? I don't know if it's probably 15 years since you were involved, but I mean, I'm working with people now, and the kids they've been in like 4 football league clubs academies, and then released and into another one, released again, and you think, what's happening to these kids' mindset when they come out of this at 16 after being rejected about 5 times? What's your opinion, Chris?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's scary. That's the word I'm going to use. It's scary because, I mean, when I was growing up, there wasn't as many academies. You sort of had the main ones. You had Burnley, Blackburn, Wigan was quite a big academy at the time, but there wasn't as many. I mean, you look now, you've obviously got Accrington Stanley, and you're seeing children, like you say, from a very young age who are getting taken all over the show to take part in these academies. My little boy, he's just started playing football. He's only 4 years old, but he's really good. He's got really good coordination. He's quick. He wants to play. I don't force him. He plays with a smile on his face. But you can see already at the training sessions that I take my little boy to at 4-year-old that you've got scouts that are wanting to take the 4-year-old children, 4 and 5-year-olds over to Man City. They're offering to pay the families, buy them houses. There was one the other week where there was a 5-year-old boy who was playing down at the local team, and Manchester City offered to buy his parents a Range Rover to take him there. And that's 4 years old, 4 and 5, and you think it's a very scary world with the amount of, I'm going to say, mental pressures that are put on these young people and these young children. So I think it's good that obviously he's got me to beware of that. I'll never stop him from doing anything, but I'll always be sort of sat in the background just weighing everything up and trying to steer him through as clear as possible.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of that as well is because they're going through all this, they're not doing the type of things that I probably did and my son did, where we played for local teams and with all your mates. And like you said, Rayfield said, Celtic, I played against them when I was a kid. And some of these friends and friendships that you make, they last a lifetime. I'm in my 50s now and I'm still good friends with lads that I met when I was like 12 through football.
Yeah, and I'm the same. And I do think the fun gets sucked out of it to a certain degree. Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be players that will enjoy that pressure and players that will probably play better with that pressure. But I mean, I look back and I thought I was young when the pressure started with the games when I was playing for Burnley, but that was 8 years old. And it is young, I'm not disputing that, but you look now and it's coming further down in terms of age where, like you say, children are getting hooked by academies and like I say, the key word, pressure, it's piled on them, and you've got to be a very tough character to be able to deal with that. I think even when I was at Stanley, when I was 19, and I know we can go on to it soon, but when I was 19, I was feeling the pressure. And I know they say you're an adult when you're 18, but in my eyes, you're not, and I think you're still very naive. I was very wet behind the ears. So yeah, just going back to what you're saying there about the children with the academies, I think it definitely has a negative impact on the majority of children,
right,
and their families as well.
I just
before I appreciate that.
Just before we move on, Darren, I just wanted to ask: do you think, Chris, that you're better suited and adapted to help your son than your father was now?
Yeah. Again, my dad played, didn't play at a high level, but he wasn't really wise to the world of football. It can be a very difficult world to navigate in terms of the amount of hours you've got to give up, the dedication. And my dad did it. He travelled, like I say, he travelled down to Bournemouth. He went abroad watching me play football. But I think with the experience I've had at more or less every level of English football, every tier, from League Two downwards, I'll be able to spot things and sense that vibe from my son Caleb, if he's enjoying it or not. I think a lot of the time when I look back, I was probably playing to keep my parents happy at certain points in my career. And I wasn't necessarily doing it for myself. I was turning up on a Saturday thinking, right, well, my mum and dad's travelled to Torquay, so I've got to put a brave face on and I've got to go and do the job. And I think it's done me good, and I've learned a lot through the journey that I've been on, and to be able to pass that on to my son.
Oh, that's good. It's really interesting chat. That it's intriguing. There's something we've probably never covered before, to be quite honest. So, right, let's get on to Accrington Stanley, because it's what brings us all together normally on this podcast. So, how did it start with moving over to Stanley, Chris? What was the story there?
So when I got released from Burnley by Big Vince, I sort of had a couple of months where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I sort of fell out of love with the game. And I was contemplating different avenues. I was quite academic, so I'd got my GCSEs, and I was thinking about going to college and then possibly university, depending on whether I'd been able to afford to go or not. But then I got a phone call out of the blue, and it was from Phil Hackney. He'd contacted my dad. He'd got my number from Burnley, and he just said, "Do you want to come for a trial up at Rolls Royce in Barnoldswick?" Funnily enough.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah. So my dad took me over for the trial, and I remember meeting a couple of the players there. Bobby Grant was there. It was the first time I'd met Bobby. Peter Murphy, Jay Bell, Andy Smith. There was quite a few players there that went on to make first team appearances. And I remember the game was split into thirds, so it was sort of like 11v11 against one another. And he said beforehand, there must have been about 30 of us, all been released by clubs and things. So it was a bit of a mishmash of players, really. And Phil basically just said that you'll all play 2/3, and then if you're successful, we'll invite you back next week. And out of the 30 players, I was the only player to play 1/3. I played the first third. I scored a hat-trick. It was 3:30 minutes. I scored a hat-trick, and then he pulled me off. And he played everybody else 2/3. So I sort of came away and I was saying to my dad, because my dad had watched, I said, I don't think that's gone too well. Even though I've scored a hat-trick, I'm the only player out of the 31 or 32 that were there that's only played 1/3. So my dad was panicking a little bit, and he said, Chris, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. So we went the week after. I got a phone call, a couple of days later from Phil again, and he said, we're going to invite you back to the second trial. And then the second trial, again, it was split into 3 30-minute games. And I didn't play one. I was the only player that didn't play one. I had my shin pad. My dad had come to watch. And I remember getting in the car after thinking, I've not done it here. I've not been good enough. Something's happened. I've played 30 minutes out of 180 minutes over the course of 2 weeks. And Bobby Grant had been playing. He'd been banging goals. And Peter Murphy was going around smashing people like he normally does. And it were a really sort of strange feeling leaving. But then a couple of days later, I got the phone call again from Phil Hackney, and he was speaking to my dad. And I remember listening to my dad while he was on the phone to Phil, thinking, it's game over. This the football career's gone out the window, really. My last opportunity to make it, it's not there. And Phil said to my dad that after 5 minutes of watching me, I was the first name on his list to sign.
That's nice to hear. Then eventually, it must have been a relief, and then you progressed through the ranks, didn't you, Chris? And went on to make your first team debut. So was that?
Yeah, I mean,
Wickham, I believe.
It was a very strange feeling, like I say, getting that phone call to say I'd been signed for the youth team, which was amazing. I remember at the time thinking, well, if I don't ever play for the first team, I've played youth team football, and I've been involved in a youth team setup. But yeah, I remember I was getting in my first year as an apprentice at 16-year-old. Coleman and Jimmy Bell used to watch the youth team train. Me, Pete Murphy, and Bobby Grant were always getting pulled into the first team. So I sort of knew that I was there or thereabouts, and I knew that he was keeping an eye on me, and they were interested in me.
That's it's good stuff. So obviously you got into the first team and made your first start and went on from strength to strength, didn't you? Really early doors. You had a good start, didn't you, to your Stanley career?
I did. And again, it did come out of the blue. The gaffer and Jimmy Bell used to take some of the young lads along for first team experience to some of these big away games. Just to get a feel for the crowd. I mean, obviously going from Centre of Excellence to youth team, you're playing in front of 50 people, 100 people. And I think he wanted us to just sense that atmosphere in these big stadiums. So he took us to like Notts County, Bradford. And Bradford, you were talking 14,000, 15,000, and the fans singing and the smell of hot dogs and just that atmosphere of seeing all the faces in the crowd. It was a really, really good experience. And then he took me to Scotland at Rochdale. And I was really lucky because, well, I say lucky, John Mullin got injured in the warm-up. And I wasn't even meant to be on the bench, I don't think. He was just taking me purely for experience. And about 20 minutes before kick-off, it was about 20-3, the gaffer just pulled me. I'd had a kick around on the pitch before the game. And he just said, Chris, you're going to be starting today. And I was sort of like, wow. Like, I remember that feeling straight away of, oh my God, I don't want to play. I'm too scared. You sort of go into that mode of panic thinking it's going to be on Soccer Saturday and Jeff Stelling's going to be saying my name. And if something happens, if something goes wrong, your mind goes into sort of overdrive and you start thinking of the worst case scenario. But then I remember Procky and Mullers and Cav at the time came over to me and they knew I was only a baby. And they said, Chris, the gaffer wouldn't have asked you to start if he didn't believe in you. You're one of the quickest players on the pitch. Use your strengths and just go and enjoy it. And I remember that conversation, Mullers more or less had his arm around me in the changing room before the game. And it filled me with confidence. I think I'll always remember that. I think Mullers was an outstanding player, don't get me wrong, him and Procky, but they were amazing human beings, and they nurtured me really, really well whilst I was at Acke. So I sort of went into that game thinking, I've got to do something. This is my opportunity. This is my chance. Seeing my family in the crowd, they'd just come to watch the game. They didn't expect to watch me at all. But there was probably 4,000 or 5,000 on at Rochdale. Le Fondre was playing. Even just lining up next to Adam Le Fondre, I remember thinking, wow, like what am I doing on the same pitch as Adam Le Fondre? Will Buckley, he was playing for Rochdale. He had a really successful career with Brighton. I know he'd played at a couple of other clubs, but I was on a pitch with stars that I'd been listening to every weekend on Soccer AM, and it was a surreal feeling. And I went on to have probably the best game I'd had up to then. I had a really, really good game. I was really positive. I was beating my man. I actually scored a goal that got disallowed, and then Cav went and scored the free kick from my goal. I got man of the match, which was amazing, hearing that getting announced over the tannoy at Spotland, saying man of the match for Accrington was Chris Turner. And it sort of went from there, really, but that was the starting point of me having a career in professional football.
Oh, so we're going to come on to the rest of your Stanley career and what's happened to you subsequently in your life, Chris, but this is a little part of the show where Phil and Tony get involved, and it's over to you guys.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, that has to be a fantastic feeling, hearing your name as man of the match like that, just to kind of, finish up on what you were talking about before. But like Darren said, we do have a part of the show where we go away from football for what was Tony Robinson's invention. It's become one of our most, if not our most popular segment on the show. So let me just turn it over to Tony now for the now world famous rapid fire.
Thank you, Phil. Just before we go on, I did have my name mentioned over the PA system one time, but it was to move my car. I was blocking somebody in.
the dirtiest car in the parking lot. They're going to give you a free car wash.
Oh, no, I was just blocking.
We had a hockey that did that here.
Okay, these are just some fun questions that we have, and just sort of have a laugh with it. And but first one I wanted to ask you, you mentioned when you mentioned other players, and it seems to be a tradition where everybody has a nickname. Did you have a nickname when you were playing? What did the other players call you?
I did have a nickname. They called me DJ because growing up, from probably 13 to 16, 17, it was all the rage to have some decks, like DJ decks, and everyone wanted them with the vinyls and the needles and sort of spinning those dance tunes. And I remember it was one afternoon I had the gaffer and Jimmy Bell ended up dropping me off at home. They came in for a brew, and they saw my decks. And they were like, come on, DJ. They called me DJ. They was like, come on, DJ, let's have a spin on these. So I was spinning these decks, thinking I was the bee's knees. And it stuck. Any Christmas do we went to, they were always trying to get me up on the decks in the DJ booths in various clubs and pubs. But yeah, DJ was my nickname, and even made it on the tannoy on a couple of games. Jimmy Bell was quite witty, quite funny. When I scored against Doncaster, the guy over the tannoy had said, goal scorer for Accrington's number 16, Chris DJ Turner. Quite sneaky. He did sneak it in on a couple of occasions, but yeah, that was my nickname.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple of quick ones here. You prefer mushy or garden peas?
Oh, I'm going to go garden peas.
Oh, okay. Red or brown sauce on your bacon sandwich?
No brainer. It's brown sauce all day for me.
Good man. Black pudding with your full English, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, there you go. Now that you mentioned about being a DJ, do you have a favorite band or musician?
Oh, I'm quite into my indie music, so I'm going to say I like the Cortinas. But I also like old school music, so I like the Jam. Paul Weller, the Jam. Big fan of the Jam.
We had Chris Grimshaw on, and he talked about a fanatic for Paul Weller. I think he said he's seen him over 70 some times. So a big fan of Paul Weller.
I've never seen him. I've only ever seen tribute acts, but Town Call Malice doesn't get beaten on a night out.
Did you have a favourite stadium that you played in? Football ground? I've probably got two. I've got Bradford. That was amazing. The atmosphere, just seeing them in the Premier League growing up. So Bradford was definitely one of my favourites. And then the other stadium would have to be Wadden Road, which was Cheltenham, where I'd scored my first away goal. Very good. Favourite takeaway?
Ooh, takeaway. I'm going to go Chinese. Yeah, I like a Chinese on a Friday.
Favourite film?
Chinese, that's got to be the number one answer.
Oh, you can't be Chinese.
Favourite film? What do I like? I'm watching a lot of kids' TV at the minute with my little boy. I'm going to say The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, yeah, one of my favourites. Good answer. Yep. Okay, last one for me. Can you give us names of two people that you would like to have dinner with, whether they're living or deceased?
It's a really safe one to say, to be honest. I'd say David Beckham. I'd say he was growing up. He was my idol. So, yeah, I could have a good chinwag about football with David Beckham. Who would move
he could bear for it as well, couldn't he? He could pick up the tab as well then, couldn't he?
I'd let him pay. Yeah. Do you know what? My other one would have to be Freddie Mercury. I'm a big fan of Queen.
Right.
And I think, having a couple of drinks with Freddie would be quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a good combination.
Freddie Mercury, David Beckham. I bet you haven't had that one before.
No,
you haven't. Brought them all there, no. Two new names there. Good stuff. So, okay, let's jump back onto football, Chris. So, you started establishing yourself in the team after that breakthrough season, didn't you? A bit of a strange season, that one. I think that was the one where Paul Mullen was loaned to Bradford, wasn't it? Late on in the season when we got safe, it didn't go down very well with supporters.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one because I'd always been a winger. I'd always played either wide left or wide right. I was always getting chalk on my boots, hanging really, really wide, getting the ball to feet, and then either beating my man or whipping it into the box. But that year, the gaffer and Jimmy Bell they'd gone to the World Cup. I'm trying to think of which World Cup it would have been at the time. Might have been South Africa. They'd been to a World Cup, and all the teams were playing a very narrow formation. So they were sort of playing like a bit of a diamond. So they were going like a 3-5-2-1. It was a very strange, like a Christmas tree, which it basically gave me no position. So I remember coming back that pre-season and they brought Jimmy Ryan in, Luke Joyce was in, and everything was going very direct, and we didn't really play with wingers in any of the pre-season friendlies. We played at Northwich Victoria, played at Clitheroe, we played against Blackburn, and they were putting me in a 3 rather than the 4-4-2 or the 4-5-1 on the wings, and it didn't really suit me. Like I say, I think it was more suited for Jimmy Ryan and Joyce, who were probably a little bit more sort of well-rounded in their career to be able to play that position. I'd only ever played on the wing. However, I gave it a really, really good go. And yeah, like I say, in that season, I did play quite a few games, picked up quite a few man of the matches, enjoyed it, playing me a smile on my face, scoring a couple of goals, and yeah, making a bit of a name for myself really in that first season.
Yeah. And I'm intrigued about the season after as well, because at this point there's another person who comes in and around the first team, Mr. McConville, isn't it? So Sean McConville's, you're competing for positions with him around that time, aren't you? It's strange to think he's still playing now, and imagine what's happened to your life in between, and now you've gone back, and we'll touch on it later about you're doing well in your career, etc. But it's amazing he's still playing for them, isn't it?
It really is. And you know what? I've got so much respect and admiration for Sean for doing what he does. I was looking at pictures a couple of weeks ago on the Accrington Stanley Twitter, and it was showing all the boys doing pre-season. And I thought, you know what? I take my hat off to each and every single one of them for that dedication that you've got to put into being tip-top in terms of your physique and how well you've got to, how mentally strong you've got to be at that stage in the season to do that year in, year out, like what Sean's done. But yeah, he came in after that season. There'd been interest from Huddersfield. I got an agent after my first season, which could have been, it probably wasn't the best decision when I look back, but as an 18, 19-year-old, I was advised by Jimmy Ryan and Phil Edwards at the time. They ended up sort of speaking to their agent, who's called Steve Harvey. He was looking after quite a few lads in League One and League Two. And he took me under his wing, and he said, we've got a lot of interest on the back of me being so young, playing consistently in League Two. We said we've got interest from Huddersfield, Blackpool, Darlington. And it was sort of like, I didn't really know what to do at the time. I thought Accrington have obviously given me my chance with Phil Hackney, and then obviously the gaffer and Jimmy Bell. And I remember having a long conversation with my dad and sort of saying, do I go to Huddersfield? I remember meeting with Huddersfield representatives, and it was at the same time that Jordan Rhodes signed for Huddersfield, and Huddersfield had offered me a 1-year contract, but Aki had offered me a 2-year deal. The money I wasn't bothered about the money. I've never been driven by money, but it was more about the opportunity that I'm going to get if I stay at Accrington for 2 years. I could sort of really, really nail down my position and play week in, week out, or I could go to Huddersfield for a year's contract, like I say, sign with Jordan Rhodes, but then might get lost in the reserves, might not really kick on as much as what I potentially would have done at Accrington. So I had some big decisions to make. And like I said, I'm very close with my mum and dad, and they've followed me all the way through, and they sort of said that they think I should repay the faith that Accrington have put in me and go and sign that 2-year deal, which was drawn up by David O'Neill at the time. So I went down with Jimmy Ryan, Phil Edwards, and we signed. We all signed together as a trio.
Right, excellent. So obviously you settled into the first team squad. Ironically, the season 2010-11 were a successful season for Stanley, but a frustrating one for yourself, wasn't it, Chris? Because all your appearances were all coming from the bench, weren't they? I know you managed to score a winner against Doncaster, I think, that season, but majority of it was from the bench.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's, again, all credit to Sean, going back to Sean, because he came in, he'd had a really, really successful spell. I want to say who did he come from? It was a team in Liverpool. I can't even imagine somebody like
Skem, weren't it? Yeah,
He'd been prolific at Skem. So when he came in, he was flying because he'd had that confidence. And I think football's all about confidence. And he'd come in and he did really well. And we were both very, very similar in terms of how we played. So it was often either, who does the gaffer go with? It's either Sean or Chris. Very rarely we played on the same pitch together. It was either him replacing me or me replacing him. But yeah, that season was stop-start. I was getting half an hours here and there, which you can't really get momentum when you do that. I think you can come on and make an impact, which I did. I think I'll always be thankful to the fans, the Stanley Ultras, because they used to sing my name from the terraces, home or away, to get me on the pitch, and 9 times out of 10 it worked. If we were getting beat, or if it was a draw, they'd often sing my name, and then the gas would put me on. And then again, I'd say quite a few times things would happen because I was quite creative. But then it just wasn't enough then to get that start the next game. I think he then saw me as like a bit of an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, like a super sub that had come on and inject a bit of energy and pace into the game.
One question that we definitely are interested in is, what was it like playing for John Coleman and Jimmy Bell? I mean, certainly they are Mr. Co-Accrington Stanley at this point, with over 2 decades in there. What was it like playing for John and Jimmy?
I mean, they were very old school. I think they'd probably, as they've moved through their careers as well, I think they'd have had to adjust with the times in terms of how they manage people, how they approach training, the games. But I'll be forever thankful, obviously, that they've given me the opportunity. They believed in me at the time. But in terms of the question that you asked, how was it working with them? I think a lot of the time, a lot of the younger lads especially were very scared. I think there was games where, I remember we played Chester at home. It was a big game. I had started the game and we went 3-0 down. I think Ryan Law scored a hat-trick first half. And I remember thinking, I do not want to be going in that changing room. It was like silent as we walked in. And I remember thinking, right, I just need to get my head down here. I felt like a naughty schoolboy. And we sat in the changing rooms, and he was a leader. Was the gaffer, was John Coleman. He really was. He was very vocal, verging on aggressive. I remember one time, it was that game, in fact, where I think, do you remember Chris King? He was with Stanley for a couple of years. He was a very good left back.
Yep.
King had been rinsed a couple. Yeah, King had been rinsed a couple of times for one of the goals, and the gaffer sort of turned on him and had a right go at him, had a pop at him, and Chris King reacted and laughed under his breath. So Coleman gave him a load of verbals and then picked up a size 5 mitre ball and volleyed it into his face. And I remember thinking at the time, I will never, ever say a word in that changing rooms if it's negative, because that was the ship that he ran at the time. This is back in 2009, 2010. Things will have changed, but he didn't mince his words.
Yeah, I think football and life in general's changed, haven't they, in that period of time? I'm thinking back to my times in the workplace and back in the day compared to now. Everything seems completely different when you look back on it. Incidentally, Chris King, I think he's listened to a few podcasts. He lives in the States now.
Yeah, right. Okay, I haven't spoke to Kingy for quite a while, but it was a great lad. Yeah, it was a
he lives in the US. Yeah.
Chris, you mentioned about signing the 2-year deal with Stanley because you felt some loyalty to the club. When you left the club, how difficult was that? Was that on par with being let go at Burnley, or was this harder or easier?
I think it was probably easier, only because I was probably in more control of my life at that stage. I was an adult. I was more independent. I think as a child getting released from Burnley, that was my world, and you don't really see past that. I didn't see past the football at 8 years old. At 16 years old when I got released, but sort of getting into those late teen years, and I think I would have been 20 when I got released by Accrington, and I'd sort of made a bit of an impact in terms of the world of football, and I'd played league games, so I was gutted. Again, it was sort of unexpected. We'd played Stevenage in the playoffs. And I'd featured in the game. I'd come on. It was the game when George Jacobson.
That's a famous game we've heard a lot about.
Yeah, it was crazy. The pitch was awful. It was on Sky Sports. George Jacobson made a horror tackle on somebody. One of the Stevenage players got sent off. And then subsequently, Sean McConville's gone and grabbed somebody in the throat, got sent off. So I think we were down to 9 men. And that was live on Sky. And I had a half-decent last half an hour. I was getting the ball past Mark Roberts, and I'd put a couple of balls in and, again, give that energy that I always wanted to give. But it was the day after we all got taken to the club at Accrington, and it was really strange how they did it. They'd take you in individually, and they'd tell you whether you were going to get a contract or not, or whether it was up for negotiation. And with me, they sort of took me in and they said it's been a very stop-start season. In terms of the money, they could have offered me a contract, but it would have been on much less money than what I was on. And again, I wasn't money-driven, but it was to the point where I'd be scrimping and scraping to even afford my car at the time. And I'm thinking, as a professional footballer who's played in the Football League, I couldn't, at that time in my life, I couldn't have taken what they'd offered me.
At some point, the need to pay bills outweighs the love of the game, unfortunately.
It does, unfortunately, because it's life, and I had responsibility. I had a car. I was paying board to my parents, wanting to give a bit back and wanting to contribute. But it was laughable what they was trying to give me at the time. I'm talking a couple of £100. When there were lads that obviously non-league football at your local teams like Padiham and Barnoldswick that were on that money, and that was getting to training every single day, and it was running my car, like I say, and living life as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old. So it was, that was the last time I left the club and sort of said I wasn't happy with what they'd offered me, and it'll be thanks but no thanks. So I shook the gaffer's hand, I shook Jimmy Bell's hand, I went into the clubhouse and sort of said my farewells to all the players, some of which I still speak to now. And then that afternoon, I saw it on Sky Sports that I'd been released, which I thought left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, because I thought I hadn't necessarily been released. It was a conversation that I'd turned down what they'd offered, but then I suppose, I'd left the club, and it was, and that's what it was. But I look back now and I think, it was brutal.
Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult moving on from something like that. I mean, I just look back at my own life, and over here in the U.S., American football is a big thing that we play in high school and college. And, I was somebody that played American football for a few years in high school. And, like you said, at 16, and was get a job and pay for my car or keep playing football. And I said, well, I don't have a career in football, so it's a tough decision, and I think it's something that, anybody that's played sports in their life has had to make at some point and can really relate to.
Yeah, I mean, when it was, I remember that afternoon when it was on Sky Sports, I remember going home and seeing it on the telly. I think it said something like 7 released from Accrington Stanley, my name being one of them. It was Johnny Bates and had been released as well, and a couple of the other lads very similar in their career to me had been released. And I remember again that night, Jim Bentley at Morecambe rung me, and he just said, we want to sign you. He said, come down for pre-season, we'll have a chat, we'll sort something out, one of Stanley's rivals. But I just wanted to just switch off from football, and it was probably the worst possible time that I could have done that. So this would have been the May time, and you either go one way or the other. And I was very, very close to Tom Lees at the time. He was my roommate, and we'd spend a lot of time away from the football club together, and we'd go out for lunch and stuff with Tom. And Tom's attitude at the same age as me was completely different. He was spot on, and that's why he, in my opinion, is so successful now. He's still playing football. He's playing at Huddersfield. He'll be playing against Burnley next week. And I look at Tom, and I think he had that drive in him where he did everything by the book. He ate well. He did extra sessions. He looked after himself in the gym. And when I'd left Accrington, all I wanted to do was go on a lad's holiday to Malia, which I did. And I remember my parents at the time saying to me, it's a bad decision, this. Don't get yourself fit, get yourself flying to go into pre-season and go and continue the path of being a footballer. But I just didn't want to do it. And I was at an age where I had a voice, I had an opinion, and I could act on that. So the first thing I did was said to Jim Bentley, well, I'm going to go on holiday with the lads for a couple of weeks to Malia, let off some steam, and then I'll ring you when I get home. And I had 2 weeks of carnage in Malia where we were just drinking during the day. I'd gone from being so strict with everything during the season and my diet and looking after myself. I didn't drink. I might have had an odd one if it was a special occasion, but my lifestyle changed. That holiday just opened my eyes to being one of the boys, which they'd been sort of on those nights out while I'd missed out probably 5 years of what I thought was the best times of my life. I wanted all that back, and it came at a bad time.
Is that and we've touched on in other episodes about people, what they do after their football career. At what stage was it shortly after this? Or when did you go on into the career that you're in now, which obviously is a successful career? Like, just tell us how that transpired and what you're doing now.
Yeah, so when I stopped playing professional football, I then came back from the holiday, Malia slightly rough, hungover and about 3 stone overweight. And thought, right, well, I'm going to go and play some non-league football with my friends. I had friends that were playing at Barrow, which was the conference at the time, picking up a lot more money than what I was on at Accrington, and playing at some big places like Grimsby were in the conference, Lincoln was in the conference, Luton. So there were still big clubs, but my heart wasn't in it. I look back and I was just turning up to games, wanting the money after the game on a Saturday to then go out with my mates on the Saturday night. And my focus had gone from football to then the more social element of being a 20-year-old. So my mum, she worked, as she still does, at a local high school. And when I was at Accrington, we used to do player appearances, and I used to love it. I used to absolutely love going into all the primary schools and speaking to all the children and just working with young people, children. I've always loved it. And my mum sort of said, you'd be brilliant, Chris, at running after school clubs at Shuttleworth, which is the school that my mum was at. So I was like, right, okay, I'll go in. And I got a really good response from the children. I was going in every night after school, doing clubs, sports clubs for children with special needs. And I was being as inclusive as possible in terms of getting as many young people to participate in physical activity after school. And then the head teacher at the time, I did that for about 6 months, not getting paid, just going in and enjoying it and getting that buzz for sport back at the school. And then the head teacher sort of pulled me in and said, we want to give you a job as a teaching assistant, but predominantly doing sports and working with the children with special educational needs. And so I did that for quite a while. Luckily, I'd got qualifications whilst I was at Accrington. So as part of the YTS programme, the youth team scholarship, I think it was 1 or 2 afternoons a week. You'd have to go to Accrington and Rosendale College to do a BTEC in sport and exercise science. And I was the only one that actually went to college. I look back and people like Bobby Grant and Peter Murphy, they never went to college. So they'll come out with nothing. But I came out with a national diploma over my 2 years at Accrington. And I think that was largely due to the environment that I grew up in with my mum and dad, making sure that I was always on top of my homework at school and sort of making sure that the academic side of life was always covered. So that put me in good stead with the job I got at Shuttleworth College. So I was a teaching assistant for a year, and then a head of year job came up, and it was to take the new year 7 children. So I went for the interview, and I got the head of year role at Shuttleworth. And I've never looked back. I'm still doing that job now, and I've been at Shuttleworth for 10 years. And the experiences that I got from football are still passed on every single day when I'm at work at Shuttleworth. We've got the children that still have a lot of respect for me because I've played football, I've been there, I can pass on advice. And yeah, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about myself on the journey that I've been on, the football journey, which again, it's something that not many people have. But I've become a lot more resilient as a human being through the journey that I've been on, which has, put me in good stead to continue the work that I do at Shuttleworth.
Well, it's a great story, and I thank you for sharing and spending some time with us today and sharing your story. It's very interesting how your path has taken to where you are, and we appreciate you joining us today.
No, thank you so much. Like I say, it's been good for me to be able to share my story with you guys. And yeah, I hope that the listeners can sort of get a feel for the ups and downs of professional football.
Chris, do you watch football these days? Do you actually go and watch any games, or would it interest you to ever watch Accrington, or do you just keep in touch by checking results, etc.?
Yeah, do you know what? A lot of people have asked me that question, and I think it's really hard, and I think it's been hard for my family as well, because growing up being a player, you sort of lose that buzz as a fan. You sort of like, it's really strange. It's only been over the last couple of years that I'd call myself a Burnley fan again, because I've needed everything to straighten out in my head with the emotions of being a professional footballer to obviously not being, and being able to manage that. So since having my little boy, that's when I've been able to like sort of draw a line underneath the playing side of things, and become a fan again. And I've been on the turf a couple of times to watch Burnley, which has been really good. I haven't been on Stanley since I've played, but it would be amazing for me to take my little boy on there and show him around, and again, just get that buzz back for football and being a fan and enjoying it.
Yeah, well, you should make it happen. I'll buy you a pint if you come on, bring him along, and we'll get together this year. And I think you'd enjoy it, and I think everyone would enjoy seeing you as well, Chris.
Yeah, no, because it's been such a big part of my life. It'd be nice to go back and sink a few Guinness in Corley's bar after. Yeah,
we'll make it happen.
Did you say Guinness? That's the right kind of beer there. That you're speaking my language now.
Yeah, I love a pint of Guinness, or a nice IPA. Big fan.
I am looking forward to trying that Aki Ale, though. I mean, when I get to Accrington for the first time, that will be one of my first stops is Coley's, and you try that first pint of Aki Ale, and hopefully Darren and maybe even Tony will be over there at that time, and we can get together and maybe record at Coley's sometimes. I think that would be a dream for all of us.
I think I'm looking forward to Darren buying a pint.
That's a dream for Tony, right?
I said I'd buy Chris one, not you.
Yeah, I figured.
you owe me too many, mate.
I know. I've got many more IOUs than I can shake a stick at. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'll get the Jaeger bombs in.
Oh yeah.
Pints will be all around on me when I come over. And Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to come on with us today. And I've just, enjoyed hearing your story so much. And like Darren and Tony have said, with the show, our biggest goal is to, tell the entire history of Accrington Stanley. You're an important part of that history. And then also, hearing about your life outside of football has been incredibly interesting, and we look forward to chatting with you again in the future. And thank you so much again for coming on with us today.
Yep.
No,
Tony and Darren, did you guys have anything else?
No, just thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
No, it's been amazing. Like I say, it's been really, really good. And the work that you guys do, it's phenomenal. Like I say, I've been through a lot of the podcasts that you've recorded, the guests that you've managed to get on, and keep up the great work. It's a really, really good listen.
Appreciate that.
That's the biggest compliment that we can get is hearing that you're listening to the show and enjoying it. So thank you so much, and we're ecstatic to hear that you're enjoying it, and we look forward to having many more great guests on and continuing to tell the story of what we believe is not just the greatest little club in the world, but the greatest club in the world, period.
Absolutely. Nice. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Well, if everybody's ready, we'd like to finish up with an On Stanley On, so I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. On Stanley On!
Stanley On!
Stanley Arms. Cheers, Chris. Thanks. Bye.
No problem at all.